Hello, Year 10. Today's video is introducing you to the way to approach Paper 2, Question 3, the language question. And it differs from Paper 1, Question 2, the language question, in that it's worth 12 marks rather than 8. And I'll talk to you about why that is in a minute. But first of all, I just want to show us where the question appears on the paper. So it's paper 2, 1 hour and 45 minutes. And just to refresh you, you've got your question 1, your information retrieval question, 4 statements which are true. And then the one we have practiced in the past weeks, the summarize question, the 8 marker. Use details from both sources to write a summary about similarities, or it could be a summary of the differences in something. And then you know that the big marks come from how you infer, what is unsaid in those texts. Okay, so if we have a look at what the question reads like, the one we're going to be dealing with today, question 3, the language question. You now need to refer only to source B. Okay, so it's only one of the non-fiction sources in paper 2, and it will specify which lines you need to be concentrating on. And the sentence stem will always be, how does the writer use language to? And then depending on the text, this is the main bit you need to be paying attention to. Describe her first experiences of cycling. So that's just to have a look at the question, but we're going to practice that today, and I'm going to give you some guidance, some hints and tips and tricks. And we're going to look at a couple of texts today, one short and one longer. Okay. So if we have a look at your resource today, I'd like you to have this resource in front of you. You can write all over it. You can have paper next to you to make notes, and that is what I would advocate you doing. Okay. So lots of people ask me, so how does this language question differ from the one in paper 1? What do we need to do differently? Well, it's a 12 marker, so obviously you're going to need to write more. Now, I always advocate for an 8 marker. You write 3 sections, 3 chunky paragraphs, 3 chunkers as I call them. Well, for this one, I'd like you to think about you're writing 4 sections, 4 chunky paragraphs. But the reason this question is different is that you are looking for different language features because it is a non-fiction text, and non-fiction texts tend to use different language features. Okay, a lot of the features they will use are the same. They will both use similes and metaphors. There might be personification within the text, but non-fiction texts tend to use different types of features. Now, what I've got here for you is a rather strange mnemonic that might be quite helpful for you to think about and to remember and to have in front of you when you're analysing the language and looking at the language of a non-fiction text. I call it your mad father's crotch list, which is a little bit, well, it's really quite unappealing, but it's a helpful mnemonic. So some of the features, and folks, by all means, this is not all of the features you should be looking for, but these are some of the things you can be looking for in a non-fiction text. And then obviously over on section B, using when you're being asked to write a non-fiction text for your question 5. So these are, this is the mnemonic here: metaphor, anecdote, direct address, fact, alliteration, a triplet, hyperbole, which is obvious exaggeration, emotive language, anything that tugs at the heartstrings, generally about animals or children or weak or vulnerable or the elderly. repetition, statistics, use of contrast, rhetorical question. I don't need to go over most of these for you. An opinion, creating an enemy. Lots of people ask me what that one is. If you're writing in a very serious and almost angry tone, you might be creating an enemy of your reader. You might be creating an enemy of the person you are writing to, really using a rather scathing tone. And use of humor. Here, lots of different types of humor, such as sarcasm or satire. Okay, anecdote. I'll just pop back up there because lots of people ask me what anecdote is. It's just a little short personal story to illustrate a point. And that's what we have there. So those will be very helpful for you in your paper 2 revision. Okay, so we're going to go on and look at a question 3, a language question. And we're going to practice it with a very short text from the 19th century. So if we, that should say question 3. We'll pop that question 3. In the extract below from The Girl of the Period by Eliza Lynn Linton, how does the writer use language to persuade the reader that girls are given too much freedom by their mothers? So I'll just read this through with you now. Now I've got, just for our purposes, because I'm introducing this question to you today, I've got things that you might want to pay attention to that are underlined. So I've underlined things that you might think are worthy of commenting on. So how does the writer use language to persuade the reader that girls are given too much freedom by their mothers? So that is the bit in the question that's important. Okay. The liberty allowed to young girls grows yearly more and more unchecked. They walk alone, travel alone, visit alone, and the gravest evils have been known to arise from the habit which modern mothers have of sending their daughters of 16 and upwards unaccompanied in London to colleges and classes. Mama has grown stout and lazy and has always some important matter on hand that keeps her at home, half asleep in the easy chair, while the girls go to and fro and take the exercise befitting their youthful energies. Of course, no harm can befall them. They are her daughters, and the warnings given by the keener-eyed who have had experience are mere inventions of the enemy and slanders against the young. So, they parade the streets, dressed in the most startling and meretricious costumes. Meretricious, the glossary there. And that fatal doctrine of self-protection counts its victims by the score as the consequence. So what I'd like you to do now is have a pause the video here, and just annotate according to the things here that I have underlined. So for instance, for the first one, so unchecked is an adjective. So the liberty allowed to young girls grows yearly more and more unchecked. So that's an adjective there, which suggests that girls are being neglected. Okay, so obviously the next one, you'll identify one of the techniques there from your Mad Father's Crotch list there, and I'm going to ask you now to pause the video and do some annotations on the underlined words and phrases. Okay, folks, I hope you've taken as much time as you need there. So you will hopefully have identified here that the writer here is using a triplet and repetition of the adjective alone to suggest that these girls are somehow more vulnerable than they need to be. Here I've underlined the abstract noun evils have been known to arise from these girls becoming freer. And the adjective evil suggests that perhaps, well, there are connotations of some sort of biblical punishment or, grave danger that these girls are in. Okay. Mama has grown stout and lazy and always has some important matter on hand. I think the suggestion is there that their mothers are just too busy doing nothing, half asleep in the easy chair. So I think sarcasm is being used there to suggest that these girls are given too much freedom. Always some important matter on hand as they're half asleep in the easy chair. And the final line here, I don't know whether you've annotated here, so they parade the streets. The verb parade suggests that they're showing themselves off. They're putting themselves in danger just so they can be seen, like they are some sort of spectacle, dressed in the most startling and meretricious costumes. Well, this meretricious, that's a word we don't use very much anymore, but suggests that there's something vulgar about them. And there is a suggestion of loose morals there, perhaps, with that adjective meretricious. So you may have got some of those ideas, you may not. If you didn't, don't worry. That is the type of thing that we're looking for. Okay, now let's have a look at a question 3. That should say question 3 there. So you now need to refer to only the emboldened lines in this text. How does the writer use language, so that will always be the stem, in his speech to influence the jury's view of the relationship between a dog and his owner? So how language is used to influence the jury's view of the relationship between a dog and its owner. So I would suggest that the main bit of the question here is looking at how language is being used to present the relationship between a dog and its owner. Now, the speaker here is a lawyer, and it's an extract from a speech he delivered during the trial of a man accused of killing a dog. Okay, so I'll read this through with you now. Gentlemen of the jury, the best friend a man has in the world may turn against him and become his enemy. His son or daughter that he has reared with loving care may prove ungrateful. And those who are nearest and dearest to us, those whom we trust with our happiness and our good name, may become traitors to their faith. The money that a man has, he may lose. It flies away from him, perhaps when he needs it most. A man's reputation may be sacrificed in a moment of ill-considered action. The people who are prone to fall on their knees to do us honor when success is with us may be the first to throw the stone of malice when failure settles its cloud upon our heads. The one absolutely unselfish friend that man can have in this selfish world, the one that never deserts him, the one that never proves ungrateful or treacherous, is his dog. A man's dog stands by him in prosperity and in poverty, in health and in sickness. He will sleep on the cold ground where the wintry winds blow and the snow drives fiercely, if only he may be near his master's side. He will kiss the hand that has no food to offer. He will lick the wounds and sores that come in encounters with the roughness of the world. He guards the sleep of his pauper master as if he were a prince. And when all other friends desert, he remains. When riches take wings and reputation falls to pieces, he is as constant in his love as the sun in its journey through the heavens. If fortune drives the master forth, an outcast in the world, friendless and homeless, the faithful dog asks no higher privilege than that of accompanying him, to guard him against danger, to fight against his enemies. And when the last scene of all comes and death takes its master in its embrace and his body is laid away in the cold ground, no matter if all other friends pursue their way, there by the graveside will the noble dog be found, his head between his paws, his eyes sad, but open in alert watchfulness, faithful and true, even in death. Wow, there's lots of emotive language that's being used there in that final line. But we know that we need to refer only to the emboldened lines, so the bits in bold. Right. Now I've got a planning space here, folks, where you would put the technique and explain a little bit about it here. And I'm going to go over some things. I'm just going to point out a few things here. And from the things that I point out, and maybe the things that you come up with yourself, you can create your chart. Now, if we have a look at this emboldened section here, we're looking for language features. Let's go back to the question that present or used to influence the relationship between a dog and its owner, influencing the jury. Okay. So this, let's see, this extended noun phrase, absolutely unselfish friend. There's an awful lot you could say there about that. The loyalty, unselfish there, being used as a contrast with the selfish world, as though the dog exists outside of that. Okay. I wonder if we have any other contrast. Oh yeah, health and sickness. Interesting. And then we have contrasts. So the writer here is using opposites to suggest that even in extreme situations, a dog remains loyal. So we have those use of contrast, use of opposites, opposing ideas to suggest that a dog remains constant in his loyalties. And speaking of constant, we might have the idea, another thing we might put down, the second, so you might put use of opposites or contrast here and explore what it suggests about dog's relationship with man here. Another bit we might put here is the use of metaphor. That might be your second section. He is as constant in his love as the sun is in its journey through the heavens. Well, that's a metaphor there, so I might pop that there. I think I could probably say a lot about that. Constant in his love. Oh gosh, it's not even a metaphor, it's a simile, folks. He is as constant in his love as the sun is, so I put simile here, as the sun is in its journey through the heavens. So we have this imagery of the sun and bursting through past the sun to the heavens. It suggests that a dog's love, perhaps there's something otherworldly about it. There's something very, very superior about a dog's love that doesn't exist within humanity, perhaps. Another thing you might have picked up on is the use of verbs, powerful verbs which suggest the dog's loyalty and love. So the verb kiss, the verb lick. The verb guard suggests the loving care and the loyalty and protective, I'm having trouble highlighting that, and protective nature as a dog. And again, here the use of these powerful verbs suggests almost as though the dog is a human or a man's carer, no matter what happens in the world. Now, for the last section here, folks, I'm going to ask you to create your own or come up with your own feature and explore it here. And I'm going to ask you for homework now to create your 12-mark question based on what we have or what you have come up with in your planning space there. Okay, now when you do this, I would suggest, because it's a 12 marker, you're writing about one side to two sides, or one side and 3/4 of a side. That's what I would be expecting there. I've given you lots of lines there. But what you can do is, once you've done this, you can email it to me on sue@gcseschool.co.uk. So you either email that to me once you have done it, and you can just take a picture of it, or you can scan it through to me, and I'm happy to get back, and I will mark it and get it back to you ASAP. Okay, I hope that's really, really clear, folks. Have a go at it. You do not need an introduction. So the first thing that we talked about there, we came up with, was contrast. So you would start straight in here with contrast is used throughout the extract to persuade the jury of the loyalty of the dog toward man. And then that might be it. You can feel free to use that, and that gets you started. Do not forget, folks, it is also interesting that. Do not forget, furthermore, remember depth and detail. And because this is a language question, it's really, really important that you zoom in and take your ideas as far as you can. I hope that's been helpful. Have a go at that and email it to Sue, that's me, at gcseschool.co.uk.